Imagine this: you're sitting next to her, close enough that you can feel the warmth of her arm brushing yours. She leans in, she shifts her body toward you, she tilts her head just slightly, as if listening more intently, but she doesn't say anything. The silence feels heavy, not empty. Her closeness draws you in, but her quiet leaves you guessing. And in that guessing, you feel the pull, because the more unclear she is, the more you want to solve her. This is not accidental. It's a game, and if you don't understand it, you'll find yourself trapped in a cycle of overthinking, over-investing, and slowly losing ground without realizing it. The truth is, women know that proximity without words is powerful. Words are commitments. They can be measured, challenged, or even proven false. Silence is endless projection. When she moves closer, yet stays quiet, she is giving you just enough signal to stir your imagination, while withholding enough clarity to keep you unsettled. You begin to wonder, does she like me? Is she shy? Is she testing me? Did I do something wrong? That mental spin, those hours you waste analyzing, are already proof that she has influence over you. Let me be brutally honest: when a woman leans closer without speaking, it's not always about attraction. Sometimes it's about curiosity. Sometimes it's about attention seeking. Sometimes it's about testing how easily you can be thrown off balance. Women instinctively know that men crave certainty. That craving is your weakness. If she can control your focus by staying close but silent, she has the upper hand without lifting a finger. Picture this scenario. You're at a party, you're talking with friends, relaxed. She slides into your personal space, laughs at a joke you didn't direct at her, and stays there. But instead of starting a conversation, she lets the silence hang. You notice her perfume. You feel your body stiffen slightly. You become aware of every small movement she makes. She hasn't invested anything yet, not a story, not a question, not even her attention fully. But already, your energy is centered on her. That's the trap. Proximity makes you chase. Silence makes you guess. And your guessing makes you invest. So what do? Most men make the mistake of filling the silence. They start talking more, explaining more, revealing more. They feel the weight of her closeness as an invitation, and they scramble to justify it by performing. Suddenly, you're telling jokes, oversharing stories, trying to read her face for clues. You think you're winning her over, but really you're showing how fast you can lose composure. She hasn't said a word, and already she knows she has you. The strategic move is the opposite. When she moves closer but stays quiet, you don't rush to interpret it. You don't seek answers. You let the silence be. You match her stillness with your own. That's how you flip the dynamic. Because silence only controls the man who can't handle it. If you stay grounded, relaxed, unbothered, she is forced to either speak or retreat. And in both cases, the power shifts back to you. Here's the psychology behind it. Silence is uncertainty, and uncertainty fuels desire. Women often use uncertainty as a tool, not always maliciously, but instinctively. It creates tension, and tension makes you chase. If you allow yourself to be pulled into that tension, you're giving her all the leverage. But if you can resist it, if you can show that her closeness doesn't shake you, you become the rare man who cannot be manipulated by proximity. That's what draws true respect. There's a saying, what you do not react to, you control. If she moves close and you immediately adjust, lean in, or talk more, you've given her confirmation that she controls the frame. But if you remain steady, if you stay calm, keep your voice slow, keep your body language unshaken, then you're showing that your reality doesn't depend on her movements. That is the essence of masculine presence. Think about the cost of failing this test. Every time you overreact to silence, you train yourself to chase approval. You become addicted to scraps of attention. You start measuring your value by how close she sits, how long she lingers, how often she glances. That's not attraction, it's dependence. And dependence is exactly what makes men weak, forgettable, and easily discarded. The shift comes when you realize this. You don't need to decode silence. You need to master yourself in it. You don't need to ask, why is she quiet? You need to ask, why am I so desperate for noise? A man who can hold his ground when she moves closer but stays quiet is a man who teaches her that his attention isn't cheap. That's when she starts working for it. That's when her silence breaks, not because you filled it, but because she couldn't stand your calm. Have you ever noticed how you suddenly started talking too much just because she stayed quiet? How many times have you walked away from a moment like that, replaying it in your head, wondering if you did the right thing? And tell me honestly, do you find it harder to sit in silence with a woman than to handle rejection outright? You've been there before, the quiet that feels like a question. She leans in, you feel her presence magnify, and suddenly your brain is on fire trying to interpret every micro movement. Did her shoulder brush mine on purpose? Why isn't she saying anything? Should I ask her something? Or would that make me look needy? That loop is where most men collapse. You're not collapsing because she's close. You're collapsing because silence, paired with her closeness, exposes your need for certainty. Understand this, her silence is not absence, it's pressure. Women instinctively know how to use silence to amplify emotion. It's like holding a note in music suspense builds, not in the sound, but in the pause. When she sits close yet says nothing, she's weaponizing that pause. If you rush to fill it, you're showing that her mere presence is enough to make you lose your frame. Think about the deeper pattern. Women don't always test with words, they test with atmosphere. A quiet woman sitting close is an atmosphere test. Can you keep your ground without being spoon-fed reassurance? Can you exist without her validating you with chatter, laughter, or compliments? If you can't, you fail. She may not even consciously realize she's doing it, but she will feel the difference. She will sense when a man collapses into performance versus when a man remains calm in the unknown. Here's what most men don't notice. Silence is a filter. The man who can't handle it gets exposed. He reveals too much. He scrambles. He tries to prove himself. The man who can hold it, who leans back, sips his drink, smiles slightly, and lets her silence hang, he becomes mysterious. He becomes the one she needs to lean toward harder, to speak to earn attention from. That's the paradox when you stop chasing the meaning of silence. You force her to break it. Let me give you a story. A guy I know, we'll call him Mark, was always the entertainer. Whenever a girl grew quiet, he'd double his energy. He'd tell another joke, reveal another detail about his life, talk about his ambitions, just to make sure the silence never lasted. One night, sitting next to a woman he really liked, she leaned closer and stayed quiet for several minutes. He panicked inside. Instead of waiting, he launched into a full confession of how he'd never met anyone like her, how he thought she was different. By the end of the night, she smiled politely and excused herself. She never texted back. Why? Because his need to fill the silence showed her everything that he was already hooked, already chasing, already overexposed. She didn't have to wonder about him anymore, he gave it all away. Now contrast that with another guy I knew, David. Same situation, a woman leaning closer, quiet. But David didn't rush. He leaned back, stretched slightly, kept sipping his drink, and let the quiet be quiet. After a moment, She couldn't take it anymore. She turned to him and asked, "What are you thinking about right now?" That's when he had the upper hand. She was the one trying to break into his frame, not the other way around. His silence wasn't passive, it was power. So how do you apply this first? Stop fearing silence. When she's close but says nothing, treat it as neutral, not as a demand. Second, anchor yourself physically. Slow your breathing, relax your shoulders, keep your movements deliberate, not rushed. This signals composure. Third, if you do speak, make it minimal and slow. A single calm statement or question carries far more weight than nervous chatter. You're not trying to entertain, you're trying to remain unshaken. And here's the most crucial tactic: resist the urge to interpret. Don't sit there wondering if her silence means she likes you, hates you, or is testing you. The moment you step into interpretation, you're already chasing. Instead, step into indifference. Tell yourself, if she wants to talk, she will. If she doesn't, I'm fine. That mindset frees you. And strangely enough, it's that freedom that makes her want to speak, to explain, to reach for you. Remember, silence is never neutral in dating. It's either a trap for the man who can't stand it, or a weapon for the man who can wield it. Which one you become depends on whether you can detach from your craving for certainty. Because when you show her that her quiet presence doesn't shake your foundation, she starts to feel something rare, that she is in the presence of a man who doesn't need her validation to exist. Tell me, how many times have you over-explained yourself because you couldn't handle her silence? Have you ever realized, only later, that you gave away all your power just by talking too much? And what would change if, the next time she moved closer but stayed quiet, you simply leaned back and smiled? You know what really eats at men in these moments. It's not her silence, it's your own imagination. When she's close, quiet, and unreadable, you project. You project your hope, your fear, your need to know. You build entire stories in your head. Maybe she likes me, but she's shy. Maybe she's waiting for me to say something bold. Maybe I already messed up and she's pulling away. Each story drains you. Each story makes you chase a ghost. And the more you chase, the more she controls without effort. Let me tell you something you won't hear in polite dating advice. Women often rely on ambiguity because clarity would kill the game. If she said exactly what she felt in that moment, "I'm interested but unsure," or "I'm bored but enjoying your attention," or even, "I just like the way it feels to sit close to you," then you'd have the power to decide how to respond. But by saying nothing, she keeps all possibilities alive. She doesn't commit to one reality, so your mind does the work for her. And that's why it feels so intoxicating. You're not addicted to her. You're addicted to the uncertainty she creates. This is why some men spiral. You can spend weeks replaying a single quiet moment in your head, convincing yourself it meant something deeper. Meanwhile, she wasn't investing anything. She didn't give you her vulnerability, her clarity, or even her words. But you gave her hours of your thought, your energy, your focus. That's the cost. And if you're not careful, you'll start shaping your behavior around chasing more of those little silent signals. That's how men get trapped in lopsided dynamics, always leaning in, never receiving the same weight back. So what's the strategy? First, strip the projection. A woman's silence next to you does not mean anything until she follows it with action. Read that again. If she leans closer but never invests with words, questions, or effort, it's just noise. Don't dignify it by turning it into a grand story. She earns meaning by what she does, not by how close her shoulder is to yours. Second, control your body language. When most men feel that tension, they fidget, They turn toward her, lean in, look for eye contact. That's unconscious signaling of need. You want her to acknowledge you, so your body moves first. Stop doing that. Train yourself to stay calm, to hold your frame, to remain slightly angled away until she engages you directly. This forces her to escalate rather than you. Third, reclaim your inner dialogue. Instead of asking, "Why is she quiet?" ask yourself, "Why am I giving this so much power?" That's the cut you need. Every time you pull yourself out of the loop of over-analysis, you weaken her silent control. You remind yourself that your value isn't determined by what she does in 3 minutes of silence. It's in the life you live and the composure you hold, regardless of who's sitting next to you. I'll give you an example of how powerful this shift can be. A friend of mine, Alex, used to be the classic over-analyzer. Anytime a woman grew quiet, he'd spiral. But after enough frustration, he tried something different. One night, sitting at a bar with a woman who leaned in but stayed quiet. He didn't move. He didn't speak. He just sipped his drink and let the music fill the space. 10 minutes passed before she finally blurted, "Why are you so calm?" That question changed everything. She was the one who felt the silence, not him. He didn't break first, and in that moment, she realized she couldn't control him with silence. She had to actually show up with substance. That's when the dynamic flipped. Here's the real prize when you master silence. You stop being pulled into low-effort games. You stop rewarding half investment with full attention. You start drawing women who are willing to meet you with presence, not just proximity. And the ones who only wanted to play with your focus, they fade away. You'll be shocked at how quickly they disappear once they realize they can't get free energy out of you anymore. Think about it. How many times have you mistaken her leaning closer for genuine connection, when in reality, it was just a flicker of interest or worse? A test. How often have you told yourself a story about her silence, only to later realize she wasn't thinking about you at all? And here's the hardest question: are you brave enough to let silence hang, even if it means discovering she was never really invested? Here's what you need to confront. Silence exposes your craving. When she's close and quiet, you're not just dealing with her, you're dealing with the part of yourself that fears being unseen. That's why it stings so much. Because in your mind, closeness feels like a promise. If she leans in, if her body is near, it must mean something. Right, and when she doesn't speak, your brain scrambles to fill the gap. You confuse physical proximity with emotional intimacy, but they are not the same. Women learn early that presence can be more powerful than words. A glance, a pause, a lean. These gestures don't cost her anything, but they pull men in like gravity. And here's the brutal truth: if she can get you hooked with gestures alone, why would she give more? Why would she reveal her feelings, her effort, her vulnerability, when you're already handing her your attention for free? This is the hidden economy of dating. Men overpay with energy. Women underpay with signals. Think about how many men spend hours after a date replaying one silent moment. She leaned into me, but didn't say anything. Does that mean she's nervous? Was she waiting for me to kiss her? Did I miss the chance? That endless loop is proof of imbalance. Because while you're dissecting silence, she's moving on, not even aware of the weight you've given it. The cost is higher than you realize. When you let silence control you, you slowly train yourself to accept crumbs as if they were feasts. You start confusing small signs for big commitments. You lower your bar, justifying her lack of clarity as mystery instead of calling it what it is, withholding. And in that state, you become predictable, pliable, easy to guide. Here's the tactical correction: stop interpreting. Silence does not demand a conclusion. If she leans in but doesn't engage, treat it as neutral until proven otherwise. Attraction is not measured by inches of distance, it's measured by her effort to connect. A woman who is truly interested won't just orbit near you, she'll invest, she'll ask, she'll try to pull you into her world. If all she's offering is closeness without words, then it's just theater until her actions confirm it. And while you wait for confirmation, you don't lean in, you don't overperform, you don't lose composure, you stay steady. That's what frames you as the rare man. Because here's the irony, the less you chase meaning in her silence, the more she feels compelled to clarify it. When you don't flinch, she has to speak, to move, to show. And if she doesn't, you've already saved yourself from pouring energy into an illusion. I want you to test this. Next time you're with a woman and she leans close but stays quiet, hold yourself still. Don't interpret. Don't overthink. Let the silence hang. Watch what happens. Two outcomes are possible. One, she breaks the silence herself, trying to earn your response. Two, she withdraws because she was never invested beyond the tease. Either way, you win. Because you exposed reality without paying for it in overexposure. A woman can respect a man who isn't shaken by silence. She cannot respect a man who dances nervously every time she withholds. The first man is grounded, immovable, magnetic. The second is a performer, desperate for cues. Women may flirt with the second, but they commit to the first. Now ask yourself this with brutal honesty. How many times have you replayed silence like it was evidence of love, when really it was just her enjoying your attention? How often have you built castles out of her quiet, only to realize later there was no foundation at all? And here's the challenge: would you rather face the truth of her disinterest quickly, or live in the false comfort of interpreting her silence as hope? The silence feels like a riddle, but the riddle is you. She isn't speaking, yet you hear 1,000 voices inside your head. Each one whispers a different possibility. One tells you she's into you, another says she's testing you, another warns she's losing interest. And in that storm, you forget the only voice that matters, your own. That's the hidden cost. Silence hijacks your focus, pulls you out of yourself, and traps you in a guessing game where she holds all the cards. Let's tear this apart. Why does silence work so well on men? Because men are wired to solve problems. Give a man uncertainty, and he'll bend his entire energy toward finding clarity. She knows this, even if only instinctively. By leaning close and withholding words, she creates an unfinished puzzle. And unfinished puzzles don't leave your mind alone. You think you're chasing her, but you're really chasing resolution. That's why you can't stop thinking about it later. It's not her you're obsessed with, it's the unsolved tension. And here's where it gets darker. Women who understand this use it as control. They don't have to be cruel, they just have to be silent. They lean in, hold the space, watch you scramble. The moment you start performing, they know. They know your focus belongs to them. They know your composure cracked. And once a woman knows she can bend you without words, she'll keep doing it, because why would she stop? So what's the antidote? Detachment. Not coldness, not rudeness, detachment. That means you stop tying your sense of value to how she behaves in silence. If she leans in and says nothing, fine. If she stays quiet, fine. Your energy doesn't spike. Your heart doesn't race. Your mind doesn't overinterpret. You remain grounded. You let her presence exist without demanding meaning. That's what women find rare, a man who doesn't crumble into overexposure when tested with nothing. Detachment shows up in small behaviors. Instead of shifting your body toward her when she leans in, you stay relaxed, maybe even leaning back slightly. Instead of firing off filler conversation, you take a sip of your drink, glance around the room, carry on like nothing unusual happened. Instead of needing her silence to break, you accept it as it is. This doesn't just protect you from over-investing, it flips the script. Because when she sees her quiet presence doesn't pull you into orbit, she feels the tension herself. Suddenly, she's the one wondering, why isn't he reacting? Why isn't he chasing? Does he not care? And that's when she breaks her own silence. Let me give you an image. Picture two men sitting at the same dinner table with two different women. In one corner, the first man can't stand the silence. He leans in, asks questions, tells stories, laughs nervously. The woman smiles politely but says little. He leaves the night drained, confused, wondering what it all meant. In the other corner, the second man sits steady. He talks when he wants to, pauses without discomfort, lets the silence breathe. His woman grows restless, leans in more, finally asks, "What are you thinking about?" He didn't perform, she pursued. The difference isn't luck, it's discipline. Every time you let silence hang without collapsing into it, you reclaim ground. You train yourself to stop feeding on scraps. You teach her that your attention isn't triggered by crumbs of proximity, and you prove to yourself that you can exist without needing constant reassurance. That's what separates a man who commands respect from one who chases illusions. So here's the gut check. Are you ready to stop interpreting silence as a secret message and start treating it as neutral? Are you strong enough to let her silence stand without needing to break it? And the hardest question, do you trust yourself enough to risk finding out she was never invested? Instead of clinging to the fantasy her quiet let you build. She won't tell you this, but I will. The man who can master silence is the man she can't stop thinking about later. Not because he entertained her, not because he solved her riddle, but because he refused to play it. Have you ever noticed how quickly you give away your power the moment she stays quiet? How much time have you wasted replaying her silence like it was some sacred clue? And if you could go back, how many moments would you have handled differently if you had just leaned back, smiled, and let the silence be? She didn't break you. She revealed what you were too afraid to protect.